My name is Robert, also known as Robert D. Jackson. I'm a performer, entertainer, specializing more so in the acting. So I'm trained in acting. I did my undergrad at NYU studying acting, where I met Dimitri, who was also in the musical theater department. And so now I've returned back to NYU for a graduate study on global education and arts entrepreneurship to really figure out career pathways specifically for artists to gain sustainable incomes to be employable once they graduate. And so I think the movement sort of sparked after recognizing that not only did I have a lot of friends, more so of color and from marginalized backgrounds that were extremely talented, but didn't really have a sort of resource community or community that existed post-college that could be attainable in a way that just like puts everybody on and everybody can sort of be knowledgeable on the topic of arts entrepreneurship. So the movement sort of came with me bringing my friends and the human capital that I had within my extended networks together to say, hey, how can we take sort of the privileged opportunities that we've had in terms of, traveling the world and really gaining insight on how to navigate the industry, and how can we share that with communities across the board. And so this has started as sort of a collective of students or recent graduates between the ages of 24 and 34. And so what we're doing right now is beginning a professional development training to really make sure that our leaders have the skills and knowledge to become change makers in our community. Sure. And so what we do is for 2 to 3 hours a month, we have creative collaboration sessions, so like jam sessions in different ways to integrate different forms of art. We have resource sharing where people just come to offer like, hey, I learned this about financial literacy this week. I have knowledge when it comes to X, Y, or Z. We're also going to begin workshops in a few weeks, which is really exciting. And I think the biggest thing that we've sort of prioritized in 2017, since we've been in existence for about a year now, has been sort of our social events. So really just getting collectives and creatives together to turn up and network and meet each other within the city. Because we recognize that a lot of people were doing the same work, right? Same target audience, same neighborhood, but they don't know of each other because it's sort of overly saturated. So just allowing an event to bring people together so they can meet and bring their forces together to do the greater good. And so that's really how we sparked. And so now what we sort of been prioritizing is that professional development program to make sure that our Renaissance community are knowledgeable. And then we're also doing programming with some partnerships on the high school level to give music business backgrounds to high school students. But essentially what we want to do on a larger visionary way is just create a mentorship program for high school and recent grads to promote a millennial mentorship, but with that sort of being an untapped market and things that not a lot of research has been done in that area. I know in terms of getting seed funding and starting to gain capital, a lot of attention has already been happening on the high school level. And so that's why we're beginning with the high school programming. And then once we sort of sustain ourselves, we get to a point where we actually launch the mentorship program, professionals that go through our training.
Is the high school programming going to be similar to the overall artist development programming you're producing, just with more backing and more of like a targeted focus, or is there something different about the high school mentorship and artist development that you're doing that is not necessarily the same as the workshops and monthly professional development sessions you're having with the 24 to 34-year-old group?
Yeah, so I think the only difference is instead of going like extremely in depth with the students, just sort of giving an overview. Since right now those are once a month for 2 hours, and so the topics range. So we mentioned topics such as touring and all these different subjects, But the professional development training is more centered around like community collaboration and design thinking approaches, and so like business models for social enterprise, sort of like that higher
Right.
critical thinking. Whereas like the introductory, it's more of an introductory level for the high schools. It's sort of
Okay,
like beginning
great.
that thought process, but not really getting too extensive with it.
And you mentioned that there's a lot of interest right now in capitalizing these arts programs. Are you seeing as a whole more people are exploring the aspect of being a professional artist? And what are some of the pieces of advice that you've been giving them?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is strategy and to develop your individual self. So we really promote the Renaissance spirit in our approach. So we're sort of looking at as using entrepreneurship as a methodology to give students the parallel between artistic ability and sort of the artistic way of living and the entrepreneurial mindset and how those are similar. And then we give extremely specific approaches to how to really think about who you are and who your target audience will be, how to brand yourself and really how to leverage social media in the next part of your work, really asking why it is you want to do what you do. So we have found that, just generally, everybody wants to be a rapper, a singer, a performer, an entertainer,
Right.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're knowledgeable on how to navigate the industry. And so while I think giving that advice to students are things that we as a community are figuring out ourselves, I think sort of that bi-directional sort of giving to the students will allow the students to sort of give us insight as well of like what the generation even after us are sort of learning or dealing with or sort of prioritizing when it comes to their musical or performing visions and stuff.
And so are you tacking on any experiential opportunities as well with some of these, either students or the older group? Because one of the things I was thinking when you were speaking was, why aren't more people aware of some of the ways that the industry works? And two things came to my mind. One right now, but the first thing was really experience. You mentioned earlier that you had a lot of experience, throughout your career and education that allowed you to kind of figure out the inner workings, and that's what allows you to give back. However, there's also the aspect of knowledge, and there are some people who just don't understand really, or haven't taken the opportunity to just go online. And I'm not saying that's the easiest, solution. Like, there's lots of things I wish I could learn, and I know I could just go online and learn them. But I don't want to dismiss anybody's passion for saying, "Why don't they just go online and learn it?" But is there anything that you're doing on top of like the knowledge piece that you're giving them that's also helping them gain that experience as well?
Yeah, so we have, so for instance, one of our partnerships is with Education Alliance. And so once a month we facilitate a conversation based off of like music business or like arts entrepreneurship, which is sort of like incorporating project-based learning. And then when it comes to on Fridays once a month, we sort of have that experiential. They'll either go out and engage with the community at an open mic at the New Eurekan, or they'll have open mics themselves, or we bring in artists to really share. And so upcoming on March 5th, we're doing a Black History Cafe where there's different artists, spoken word. I'm performing a monologue. Going to have some singers come in from the community to really share their experience, to promote like open sharing for the students, and then the students will also sort of share the stuff they're working on. And so that we're doing with Education Alliance is we're allowing them a platform to showcase their work, and then we're going to record it with the equipment we have so that they can sort of have a group EP, so that we can sort of track and show them the work that they've done, and they could even use that product later in the future when they're trying to leverage their brand or their work.
Cool. And have you been able to, show this type of work to different organizations, and what has your response been like? And I know you said that you've been getting capital and you have partnerships with pretty large scale and great organizations, but what's the feeling from the industry with what you guys are doing? How receptive are they to?
Well, just to be completely just to Dimitri back. Oh, I thought it was back. Just to be completely transparent, we've gotten raving reviews, just simply around like seeing young people sort of strapped with wisdom and knowledge that you wouldn't expect from an artist. And so just understanding, for instance, I'm 24, but I've realized that my experience at NYU and the leadership skills that I gained just from undergrad allowed me to sort of navigate and articulate in ways that people wouldn't expect. And so when we say the sort of work that we're committed to sort of passing the torch and lighting the torch on an educational front, a lot of people in the industry have been sparked and really excited for the work that we're looking to achieve. And so while most of that has been sort of visionary and motivation driven, sort of like giving people an idea of what we want to do, anytime we've done that, immediately people are like, how can I give? What can I do? And I think that's centered around the fact that diversity and inclusion are buzzwords right now, and people are trying to figure out how to make sense of it. And because the majority of us are artists of color who have experience either in the entertainment industry or highly trained, that sort of speaks to like, wow, they know what they're talking about.
Right. Exactly. That's very cool. And with speaking of some of that experience, are there certain things that you've seen that are pretty standard that an independent artist should know about or learn? And you mentioned some of the strategy sessions you're implementing. But have you been able to develop like a process, and do you believe there's a roadmap, so to speak, for a professional musician or professional art career?
Wait, say that last part again. You were breaking up a little bit.
Sorry, I was gonna say, do you believe that there's a roadmap for a professional art career, whether it's in music, fine arts, acting, or any other of the disciplines? Have you been able to kind of take your approaches or take the collaboration and the different experiences that your members have, and are you guys working on some sort of ideation of what it really takes? I'm not saying what it takes to be a superstar, but what it takes to really, have and maintain a professional, sustainable career.
Yeah, so I think we're actually in the process of figuring that out, and that might take a few years to actually develop. But what I will say to that is that I've realized that what is needed is just to understand, have an equal balance of business and high quality content. And so if you're able to match, because what we've realized is that everyone's talented, especially in places like New York City, where everyone can hit a note, everyone can rap, everyone can act. So how do you differentiate yourself from everyone else? And I think artists of color, as you've seen even in the industry now that are sort of succeeding, is that they've really promoted the multi-hyphenate, multi-potential, potentiality, all these different words around being, having different disciplines or different specializations. And so what we're wanting to use as a sort of methodology or a framework is how can we give all of our artists or people within our community a roadmap to have all of the things. So whereas they lead with singing, they could also understand, at least from a very basic level, what a business plan is like, or why you don't need a business plan, or knowing the difference between copyright and just really smaller thing, contract law, and knowing how to navigate that. That can potentially just help someone be more knowledgeable. And so I think we're in the process of really figuring out a really specific plan or roadmap. But what I do know is that we're beginning by really promoting the you can do it all framework if you're very intentional and strategic. Cool.
Very cool. So what have been some of your challenges, when you've been building out this framework and getting people together, or whatever it is, in terms of Torch from then to now, what have been some of your growing pains?
Yeah, so I think the biggest is just a lack of business experience and just entrepreneurial and startup processes. So I think the biggest challenge is also still being a constant state of learning. So I, as sort of the leader of the movement, have realized that there's so much that I still need to learn. And so while I put myself to a very rigorous, I read these materials, I study these things, I really understand what organizational theory looks like. I continue my coursework in grad school. The more I even take those courses that are centered around the work that I want to do, I realize that there's still so much to learn. And so I think beginning this process is an advantage so that we can learn from our failures. But sort of the way in which that I'm doing it now is I'm taking the knowledge that I'm learning on the graduate coursework and immediately applying it, whereas most people through a traditional pathway will learn it, map it out, take 2-3 years to implement, and I'm just not waiting. We believe that there's not enough. The time is now, and so I'm sort of doing everything immediately and applying everything immediately, rather than waiting or joining an already existing org.
Taking that lean methodology and applying it. That's awesome. And so I guess what have been some of your successes, or what have you accomplished that you've been particularly proud of? Because I know you've had a lot of accomplishments, some of your partnerships, et cetera. But what would you say some of your kind of defining moments?
Yeah, I think the biggest has just been just creating community for people. I think that a lot of the people within Torch have articulated their difficulty to navigate and balance the artist lifestyle and taking on many odd jobs and really trying to be at peace and confidence. And so I think the biggest feedback we've gotten is that there's been a lot of gratitude given to the fact that spaces have been created, and that it's something that they sort of feel they need to be a part of. So it's just been a simple wow, the energy in the room, I felt I didn't want to leave, so it's just one of those things where we've gotten a lot of love around just doing it, and not waiting, and so the commitment, commending the work that has already been done around just having events, So sort of our approach is you fail quickly so that you can learn from the mistakes because you're going to fail anyway.
Let's backtrack. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and how you've come to the point where you're not only working on tours, but also touring internationally. And I guess, what I'd like to learn a little from you, and I know that, Robert, you are also an actor, but I guess specifically as well from Dimitri, what are some of the pieces of arts entrepreneurship that are kind of specific to the business of acting, and also what are some of the things that are that pertain to both to basically all the art disciplines?
I come from New York, so I was born and raised. I went to NYU with Robert in the same program. I did musical theater and got my minor in child and adolescent mental health studies. From there, I graduated, and long story short, I started right on Broadway as soon as I graduated from NYU in a show called The Book of Mormon. I was on that show on Broadway and then on tour for a combined 2.5 years. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was a great show to be a part of, and I learned a lot for my first job as an actor, especially going into a show like The Book of Mormon. It was such a machine of a show that it almost felt like a government job in a way, because people were coming in and coming out, and it was just a constant flow of work that really never stopped. It wasn't that kind of show that everyone rehearses together and then the show opens and the show closes. It's still running even now that I'm not on the show anymore. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that show, and then from there I worked on a couple of other things. I got to shoot a television show with Jordan Peele, Tracy Morgan, Tiffany Haddish. The series premieres this April, which I'm excited about. And
nice.
Now I'm working on And now I'm working on Beautiful, the Carole King musical, on tour. So that's kind of a very small nutshell of some of the things that I've been working on. In terms of arts entrepreneurship as an actor, I think getting to work on shows like Beautiful, like Book of Mormon, like Last OG with Jordan and Tracy, I got to really listen. A lot of them who are older than me, who've been doing this a lot longer than me. I got to really experience what it was like to be a working actor, but also realize that as a working actor, I have that ability and opportunity to cultivate my own brand, my own work as well. Right. Someone really wise told me, which I now have stolen, when I talk to students and talk to other people, this person told me, it's called show business for a reason, because it's a business. And one thing that I learned was that how as an actor, it's really important to understand that you're just as much a business as any other person, whether that's a business person, a doctor, a lawyer. It's really important to work on your own brand, work on the things that you are strong at. Realize, one thing I'm really good at is making connections. I'm also a really strong writer. I've been a lot on the road, and that's led me to be a writer at certain different blogs, and I'm working as an associate editor for an upcoming magazine. Because while I'm working, I can still develop the things that bring me joy. I'm passionate. I'm an actor. It doesn't necessarily mean I can only do one thing, act, sing, dance. There are other facets to who I am and who I am as an entrepreneur that I can expand on and capitalize off of. And really understanding that and knowing what your strengths are, knowing what your weaknesses are, have certain connections I've made, I'm now getting to use them in a more professional way.
Sort of baseline approach to developing yourself as an actor in a brand that you take or that you take in, or is it somewhat individual for everybody? So how does that work, and how does someone who's looking to be an actor or an actress kind of develop that persona?
That's a really great question, and that's something that I'm still learning myself. I think a lot of it really does have to do, I think, research. As actors, the research is literally all around us. I love to people watch. Also love to sometimes get on Netflix and Hulu, and even if sometimes that may feel like I'm being a couch potato or I'm just like sitting and watching shows or binging, you can actually watch those shows and look at people. Yeah, exactly. I can watch something like last night I was watching Scandal, and I can watch that show and look at these actors, these industry, and look at the work that they're doing. And then I can say, okay, I really like Kerry Washington. Let me look up Kerry Washington and see other things that she worked on. You can see where she started and where her career kind of took off. And on top of that, the other things that she's working on as well that don't involve acting. Seeing that she is someone who's an activist, someone who has other interests that she's able to cultivate herself. And I think that those movies on whether or not she was successful as an actor. I don't think one necessarily influences the other. I think that both those things can grow concurrently. And I think the other part of it, on top of the research, is allowing yourself to be fearless and just throwing yourself into it. Because I think the only way that you can really know if something works or not, and if you're able to just kind of throw things at the wall and know that failure may be around the corner, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that in that moment, the thing that you tried maybe didn't work or for that particular experience. But now knowing that, a different approach.
Very cool. Very cool. So I wanna talk about some of your collaboration approaches within the team, because I think that a team is what a lot of people need in general. Whether you're an artist, whether you're developing entrepreneur kind of programming and just in general. And Robert, you mentioned that you study organizational development. So how do you guys manage to work with each other, despite your busy schedules, and keep everything running? And what are some of those principles that people can take with their own busy daily lives? Because like you said earlier, everybody's working part-time. It's not that easy for everybody to be an artist, whether a musician, an actor. Sometimes you need to, take jobs that, may not be exactly what you want to do, but you need to pay the bills, and, you got family and friends, and, you still have to have a life. So what are some of these, what are some of the things that you guys do to coordinate day to day, and how can some people apply these same strategies to their own lives?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, we all recognize that we're in a constant state of growing and learning and applying these skills. And so one thing we really promote is sort of gauging wisdom in the room. And so what we do is we just allow everyone to speak on their strengths, things that they know. And it really gives everyone an idea of like what they're good at and what they're not. Right? If we want to be able to commit towards empowering the next generation or our current generation, we recognize that we have to just be straight up with what we know and what we don't. And so with that, we have project management tools such as Slack and Asana that we've used on a executive level, because we have teams based out of Houston as well with development, and then we have our advisory committee that we're building and our advisory board that we're also building. And so that has all been sort of used on Asana so that we can stay on top of things. And then we've also just used the simple Google Drive, weekly check-ins at the end of the week. So usually on Fridays, that's where we decide to meet up or check in.
Right.
And then we have the professional development that we're going to start to really implement next month, where we have the community sort of doing the sharing and resource knowledge stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what do you guys see? Where do you see the future of, independent art going? Do you think that somebody's going to step in and just really develop a major label for independent artists? I know there's a few labels investing right now into some of the independent artists, tech and platforms, which is kind of ironic. Do you think it's going to be a disparate bunch of collectives, or do you think there will be a united group of collectives that all support each other? So I guess from the executive side, to take your word, how do you see the future of independent art? And then I guess from the performance side, where do you see these artists going? Do you think these artists are going to give up if they don't learn fast enough, or do you think they're just going to keep going? Do you think the market is going to be saturated? There's kind of a lot in here, but what are some of your thoughts on that?
The market is already so saturated. I think we're in a business where there are so many people. However, I think that we are. I think that we're moving this way as a society too. I think that we are moving towards independent work, such that we're seeing people being able to develop their own small businesses, their own brands. Especially now, like as an actor in my own experience, with this administration, for example, on the new tax bill, something that I've been hearing around a lot of my circuits and with a lot of my peers is that people are now looking to incorporate themselves as their own businesses. So I really do think that people are moving toward that independent work and seeing how they can generate and cultivate their own sustainability. Whether that's financially, whether that is professionally. And I think that we all kind of, in our own way, want to be our own boss, right? And not have to answer to anyone. So I think that plays into a part of it. And then I think that funnels then into a future where we may see a collective of independent artists all working together. I think that we're already sort of seeing it. And I think that people like Donald Glover, for example, people like Jordan Peele, are already ahead of the game, where we are on that cusp of realizing that we are our own brands, our own artists, who have the connections and have the networks to make things happen. all it takes is asking, right? All it takes is going up to a friend saying, hey, I know you work on this and you do that, and those things are not things that I'm strong at. Do you want to help me do this thing? And that's how Issa Rae, is able to create her shows, and now she's got her HBO pilots that are about to blow up. So I think that there are artists like that who are already doing it, and we as a society, we as a collective, are on that cusp of making that happen. So maybe there will be, and I think that Robert may align with how I feel, but I think that we may see potentially a hub where these artists can all live and grow together and collaborate together and gauge wisdom in the room with one another. Robert, am I on the right track?
Yes, absolutely. And you can see this model even used on the educational front, like these neighborhood hubs to provide resources for students outside of just learning, right? So they have like health benefit services, they have services for families. And so I think that going back to your initial question, Pat, around do we think that it's going to evolve? Similar to what you said, Dimitri, it is overly saturated, and you can see people such as Steve Stouts who are implementing the United Masters approach to like really giving artists a platform, because even labels and on a music business front, that I'm sure is that they want you to sort of already be developed and to know who you are, right, and not really focus on the art development side like they used to back in the day. And so I think because the market has expanded and so much opportunity has been given for people to create their own platforms on the social medias and SoundClouds and so forth, now all that they're doing from a production side is wanting to take people who have already done it and then give them an opportunity. And so I think, specifically when it comes to the African American community, they've had to sort of do it themselves from the very jump. Anybody you see in the industry that is sort of successful has led with their own individual passions and their own commitment. And so I think that these hubs already exist, but I don't think that it exists for young people. And so we want to potentially be that hub for artists and arts entrepreneurs to sort of come together and be in unity as they all go first on a global scale, go around back to their communities to give all the knowledge that was sort of shared. And so, it's already happening, and I just think it's a matter of us being really specific with our way of promoting the Renaissance spirit so that we can shed light on the things we've learned, but also make sure that we redefine what an arts entrepreneur looks like for the next generation, right? What we want is for artists to have a commitment, regardless of where you come from, to give back and to share that knowledge. And I think a lot of that exclusivity has existed because of the whatever purpose or reason or power. I can't speak on that because there's only so much navigating that we've done within our org. But I do know that from my experience being an ambassador for Disney is that as I come in contact with the upper elites like the Will Packers and the Steve Harveys and knowing them personally, at the end of the day they're like, okay, show me what you about. I'm not just going to hand you an opportunity. So you sort of have to prove yourself, right, even when you're in the room, to show them that to show them the dollar signs behind your name, behind the brand, behind your work. So that's what we really want to promote.
Cool.
Absolutely.
And last question is, what advice would you give to an artist of any level developing their career or beginning their career?
For someone who is looking to begin their career, I would definitely tell that person to not take anything for granted, and to understand that every person you meet along the way, every you work with, is an opportunity to make a connection for something greater. And that's not to say that, as you meet people, you should be thinking like, okay, how can you help me do X, Y, Z? I think it really just means living in your authenticity as who you are as a person, as who you are as an artist, and understanding what your brand is, and allowing those individuals who align with that to see that, see you for that authenticity, and allow them the opportunity to not only grow with you, but allow you to grow as well.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to that. I think that it's really, really, really important to lead with your most authentic self, because at the end of the day, especially when you look at the entertainment industry when it comes to TV and and film, we're in a shift in the way in which we retain and absorb media, and a lot of it's around naturalism. So they want to see real experiences. So you see the shows that are currently popular. These are all things that people feel connected to. Like, I know that person. And so with that, whatever type of artist you are, if you don't define who you are separate from the industry, you're only going to be another number, another statistic. And what people are really looking for is that authenticity, that the difference that you have from the next person, because when everybody comes in with the same haircut, with the same with the same sides, with the same sound, it's really difficult to distinguish yourself from the other person. But if you can clearly know who you are, and that's just sort of like the personal, like, self-actualization work that comes with knowing what your art means to the world. It's about really asking yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing, and who am I as I'm communicating to my target audience. But trying to really have an overgeneral, I want to be famous, or I want to speak to the world. You can't start so big. You can't be so broad. You have to be extremely narrow as possible, and defining your niche market so that you can then say, okay, now I've cultivated this fan base. These are the people that I'm speaking to with every song that I sing. And then the people who are attracted to it outside of that is just a bigger advantage, a greater outcome than anticipated. I'd probably just say just work on the most authentic self you can be, because people are attracted to who you are, not to who you're trying to be.
Word. Awesome. I like that. I appreciate that, guys. And last thing, before we go, where can people find you guys? How can people reach out to you? How can people get connected with what you guys are doing, just online or offline?
Absolutely. So we have a website, torchunites.com, where you can keep warm. We're currently, we have a newsletter that we send out quarterly, just honoring an artist in the industry, some of our upcoming opportunities and events. And then we also are on social media at Torch Unites as well, where you can sort of see the work that we're doing and the events and so forth.
Awesome. Robert, Dimitri, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.